You know, that old quote from Mike Schmidt about winning in Philadelphia, the pain of it, because you win and then you have to hear it by the next day, that can be true. But in the case of the 2025 Eagles, it is not. And what's funny is when I talk to friends outside of Philly that don't watch the Eagles week in and week out, they're like, what are you talking about? What are you complaining about? Your team's 8-2, now 8-3. Because they just see the record. They don't see what we saw last year, a dynamic offense with weapons all over the place, the ball spread around, and an offense that was dummying teams. They don't see that. They just see a record. They don't see an offensive coordinator who has taken those weapons and basically put a restrictor plate on it. So who's to blame? Now, if you followed this channel enough, you know I am the president of the Sirianni hater club. Like, if Sirianni doesn't have a hater in this world, I have no breath in my lungs. And if you want to argue that Nick Sirianni is a good coach, go argue with a fucking wall, and then go argue with Brian Billick, and then go argue with Doug Peterson, because the defense of, well, he won a Super Bowl is horrible, by the way. He's not a good head coach. But who is to blame for this situation? Because I do think that Nick Sirianni is to blame. I think that Nick Sirianni, being an offensive-minded head coach, having an offense that we're witnessing now, I think that Nick Sirianni coming out at halftime and saying, we need to stop with the penalties, and then they have 8 more of them. Yeah, I think that's on the head coach. I think the head coach consistently showing that he can coach when things are going right. You know, when the offense is clicking, oh, he loves it. But when things aren't going right, he panics like a chicken with its head cut off. Yeah, that's on the head coach. But I don't think all of this is necessarily on the head coach. And I don't think necessarily all of it is on Kevin Patullo. So who is to blame? And I'm going to shock you with the answer. Howie Roseman's to blame. Now, it sounds crazy. Howie Roseman is to blame for the 8-3 Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman is to blame for the 8-3 first place Philadelphia Eagles. But, yeah. I mean, look, the fact is, when you watch the Eagles and you watch the Rams right now, there is a discrepancy in which team is the top team in the NFC. And I understand that the Eagles did, in fact, beat the Rams. But if you remember that game, they lucked out in a lot of ways. You know, they got a miracle block from Jordan Davis, and not only that, they had another block on a field goal attempt. So, all things being equal, if that game were to be replayed, what are the odds the Eagles get 2 more blocks to win that game? Slim and none. So, when I look at this team and I look at the problems of this team, first of all, the fact that you elevated Kevin Patullo to this role, you once again elevated from within, thinking that that was going to work. And in theory, I thought it would work. I think a lot of people thought it would work, but it didn't. He is the second straight OC to be elevated from within and look like he has never watched a game of football. When he was in the building the previous year, when he saw what worked and he's finding a way to not make it work. It's honestly kind of impressive when you think about it. So when the Eagles need an OC because Kellen Moore gets poached by the Saints, the Eagles don't go out and they don't get a proven OC. They go, no, we're good. We'll promote from within. Hasn't worked. And I think at the end of the season, when Kevin Patullo is let go, because it'd be hard to defend bringing him back at this point, no matter what happens with the season going forward, whether it be, you know, the odds of him getting a head coaching position are slim and none. But this looks like offensive Sean Desai. So when they let him go, they will go out, I feel like, and get a proven OC, a veteran OC. But when that guy ends up getting poached, I don't want to see them promote from within. That is on Howie Roseman. Like, dude, it might be Nick Sirianni's recommendation that you promote Kevin Patullo, but ultimately you are the GM. And you agreeing that Kevin Patullo can do the job and then witnessing what we're witnessing. When you actually do have offensive minds outside that are on the street right now, that you'd think, could it get worse? Like, and I'm not asking for Kevin Patullo to get fired at this point because he's not getting fired. You know, I mean, I could ask to wake up next to Sidney Sweeney. It's not going to happen. So what's the point of asking for Kevin Patullo to get fired? They're an 8-3 football team, and the defense of keeping him would just annoy the shit out of you. You know, the Eagles, I feel like at this point, are acknowledging the elephant in the room, which is their offense does not look good, yet at the same time, they are kind of like an ostrich with their head in the sand, pretending that it's going to get better, don't worry, it's going to get better, and it's not getting better. They're consistently getting bailed out by their defense, albeit a defensive coordinator, by the way, who has no interest in becoming a head coach, and that's what they need. They need an offensive coordinator like a Vic Fangio who isn't out to get a new head coaching position, because the reality is this team is loaded. They are stacked. And if you get a competent OC in here who knows what the fuck he's doing, then he's going to get poached. And thus, you're right back where you started. I mean, the list of OCs that Jalen Hurts has had to deal with since college is extensive. It's almost as long as the Browns quarterback jersey. But I think he's to blame for that. But I also think he's to blame for another thing. And it might be a little bit of an ego situation with him, but the depth at O-line has cost this offense tremendously. And last season, you didn't really need to see the depth all that much. You saw Fred Johnson here and there when Lane Johnson would exit a game, or I think Jordan Mailata missed some time. But for the most part, that entire O-line was healthy. And then you were in a position where this season you needed backups to step up into starting positions, a la a Tyler Steen. I don't necessarily blame him for that all that much. You spent a third-round pick on the kid. He spent 2 years under Jeff Stoutland. It's either now or never. But when he was put into the games, like, he didn't look good in the rare instance that he came in, but it was like, okay, well, we'll put him in. What annoys me, though, is when you see what Mekhi Becton signed for in San Diego, it was affordable. And they let him go. And they could have kept him, which would have kept Tyler Steen on the bench. Tyler Steen's been healthy this season. That's the only good thing I can say about him. He sucks. He's a disaster. But you've also had to rely on guys like Brett Toth, whereas your offensive line has been banged up legitimately all year long. I brought this up in previous videos. Like, the first week, they had Landon Dickerson coming back from surgery, and then every week since then, either someone's been out or someone's been hobbling out during the game. It's thrust guys like Fred Johnson, who I think is a very good backup, and I like that trade a lot, and I would be scared to think about where this team is if they did not make that trade before the season. But it's thrown guys like him, guys like Brett Toth in the position. We saw a costly penalty from Matt Pryor today. Like, these backups that aren't ready, and they don't have depth. And I think that they don't have the depth, and they might not have had the depth last season because last season they didn't need the depth. And that is on Howie Roseman to not replenish what has, historically been the strength of the team. So I think right now, when you look at who's to blame for this situation, you can look at the relationship between Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. The reality is, if things were going well, no one will be talking about it. Every week, the media floods to A.J. Brown's locker room and bothers him and asking the same question. But it's a deeper situation than that. Why does the offense stall out? Well, it's uncreative play calling. It is, let's be real here, at times very predictable play calling. And then it's the fact that their O-line is so banged up and they don't have a ton of depth. So all of that, I feel like, falls on Howie Roseman. I know this is sacrilege to say because you can't say a bad thing about Howie, but when it comes to the offseason, I don't think he did that great of a job in replenishing things. And I think he let some guys go that maybe he shouldn't. Adoree Jackson, every time he's on the field, it smells like burnt toast. And you let him go, or you let Darius Slay go and try to replace him with Adoree Jackson, and you saw in this game, in this collapse against the Cowboys, the depth that's in the secondary was felt. Because when Adoree Jackson leaves, you think it can't get worse, and it did. I mean, I was surprised at how bad Cooper DeJean played on the outside, but in fairness, he didn't practice on the outside, and I don't know if he ever practices on the outside, but he was thrown in there, and Dak Prescott picked him apart. There's one. Then you have Reed Blankenship leave, and Sidney Brown proved to be why he is once again a backup, and a very good special teams player, but a backup nonetheless. So all of that is on Howie. And I know it's tough because you're replenishing in the cap situation, but he is a cap guru, so how much of that argument is really valid, I don't know. This isn't to say that I'm anti-Howie Roseman in any stretch. I'm not, okay? But I think it's also fair to say we can call a spade a spade. The offseason moves haven't been great. When you look at who he let go, when you look at what they replaced them with, and when you look at how it's cost this team this year, it's been felt. Kevin Patullo, I blame Howie. You're not going to fire a head coach after a Super Bowl win. I get that. Doesn't matter how much I think Nick Sirianni sucks. That would be ridiculous. But whether this offense is Sirianni, Kevin Patullo, whatever, there is an issue. You have two offensive minds and an offense that looks stagnant consistently. Something needs to be done. Well, they're not going to fire the guy that won a Super Bowl. They're more likely to fire the OC, but they're also not going to do that until after the season because the team is 8-3 and they're in first place. So we're stuck with these people. But when you look at the who's to blame, yeah, I have to put the buck on Howie. It's a rare miss after miss after miss, and I feel like it's costing them a legitimate chance at repeating the season. I hope they turn it around, but at this point, we're entering week 13. If it doesn't happen at this point, how is it going to? Let me know in the comment section who you think is to blame for this mess. Please subscribe. Subscribing is cool. I would appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thumbs up if you like this. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. I am going to go now.